experienced that if we don't create occasion and opportunity for us to learn, actually, to even unlearn the things, the pressures, yes, the pressures that this world has brought. You know, when for us who grew up from different societies, maybe in the villages, where, you know, discipline, you mentioned Tujengane, discipline. Someone would meet you on the road and they will discipline you.
Exactly.
You would go in class. Actually, there were two professionals that were highly respected.
Teachers and the priests.
Maybe and doctors. So, but right now, everything is getting watered down. You don't know who to trust. So when men meet, because you've heard of women conferences, we are going to do this, women this.
Will never get finished.
Women are being talked to a young girl. They tell her, sit down. This is how girls sit.
Yeah.
But you know, who speaks to the men? Who speaks to the men and transition them from...
It's a question we've been asking ourselves a very, very, very long time. Like, no, if no one is, might as well start.
Yes.
Yeah.
So if we as men who have this knowledge and understanding don't take this responsibility to speak to the young boys and young men. I deal with the youth on a daily. On a week, I can interface more than 1,000 men, boys, on a week. Even just yesterday, I was having a Twitter space discussing with the young people, more than 500 young people on Twitter.
And they all come there?
Yes, they all tune in to listen.
Yeah.
And one of them asked the question, how do we deal with the place of responsibility as young boys and young men transitioning into work? How do we deal with this?
Yeah. And
on that note, I'd like us to think about this, because you're talking about the importance of men meeting. You mentioned something about iron sharpening iron. And I want us to delve into this concept of responsibility, because I've heard you say it a couple of times. And also in line with just generally people raising men will talk about, can he handle responsibility?
Yes.
A man running away from responsibility. I want you to first of all give us your definition of responsibility, because it's one of those words which it is associated with very, very scary things, like a pregnant woman, that's responsibility. Marriage, responsibility. Fees, responsibility. It does not come across as something pleasurable. Help us understand, what is responsibility and how should a man embrace this concept of responsibility?
Thank you so much. Like we're having a conversation before, the word responsibility for me comes with two words. That's response and ability. That means if you want to understand the responsibility, the true definition, you must understand that the response precedes anything. And then the ability. So let's first talk about the ability. Because the response to the ability, if you don't understand the ability that you've been given, then you may not even know how to respond to it.
Yeah.
If you don't know what is given to you, you may not understand how do you deal with what is given to you. So before you hear conversations that, like you was trying to mention, a woman is pregnant, then you're responsible. You have kids at school, then responsibility. That is not actually the responsibility. Those are the effects, the fruits, the results of the responsibility. Responsibility here, you must understand what is the ability of the man. If you look at the creation story, what was my man created for? And you see, when you look at the Genesis, it talks about man and the responsibility and the things God gave him to do. To replenish, to subdue. This is not only a man, physical man, but both a woman and a man. They carry an ability to subdue. They carry an ability to have dominion.
Yeah.
This is irrespective of a female and a male species.
Yeah.
So when you understand that inside you, you've been given an ability to create. Creation is an ability given to us. The power to make wealth. That ability is given to us. The mind that God has given us, we have the mind. This mind is the creative force. The tongue That means if you speak something, you are creating an atmosphere for its maturation.
Right.
When you put, the Bible says, as a man thinketh, so he is.
Yeah.
That means your thought pattern has a creative force.
Yeah.
Now, when you understand the abilities given to you, like a woman, a girl who has just been born has an ability to grow, to conceive and have a child, and bring forth a child.
Yeah.
That means the ability is given even at 1 day.
At 1 day, 0 days.
Yes, 0 days. The eyes are made to see. That means even when you're still young, the ability for the eyes to see. That means what people see, that this is color, the color red or this, and then the eye is seeing a color. That is not actually what causes the eye to see. The ability, the innate power that is given to cause the eye to see is what is actually what we can call now into this space the responsibility. So, if, like I give an example, what is the purpose of a phone? When you see a phone, what comes to your mind? The functions of the phone. You can't find a phone and the phone is cooking. The phone is not made to cook.
Unless it overheats.
Unless it overheats. Usually, some of the phones come from a certain nation. Let me not mention the nation. So, you must understand the innate power that is given. That means if we teach people, if we train people, what is the ability God has given you? And then now from that ability given to them, now you respond
to that
ability.
Knowledge of the ability that you have.
Plant a tree there. Let us now flip it.
Yes.
It's now, he has focused a lot on ability.
Yes.
Yeah. That is the strength that God has given us. Ability. And that out of your ability, you can now
respond.
I've been thinking about responsibility in this way. Let's just flip it a bit. The capacity to respond.
That's right.
You get the capacity to respond. How? Response. Yeah. In biology, they tell us that there will be a catalyst and there will be response. There will be stimuli and there will be response. That geotropism is the response of roots to gravity. That's why roots go down, they don't go up.
Yes.
Okay,
and then there is phototropism, which is the response of plants to light. Yeah, that is biologically speaking, responsibility.
Yes.
Now, what I'm thinking here is manhood having different facets or different names.
Yes.
Graduates. You mentioned a growing child.
Yes.
Yeah. Graduates in their ability. So when I was a child, I was simply called Ngonzi. Right? Now I'm called Daddy. Now I'm called Honey. Now I'm called Baby, depending on what is needed from me.
On the mood.
you get?
Yes.
So now, I've been thinking that responsibility is my capacity to respond to what I have been called in that moment.
Yes.
You get? That if my wife turns up and says solution we're expecting, how do I respond? Is what is going to determine whether I'm responsible or not. So my ability to respond to the calling upon my life at any given time and make and again it connects with what you said, because my capacity or my ability is what is going to determine the response that I have.
Yes.
But nonetheless, if I have no response, then I am irresponsible.
Yes.
If a child has been born and then I'm running away, it means I cannot respond. I do not have the capacity to respond to the office calling of Daddy.
Yes.
Maybe you had the capacity, but you refused to respond.
Irresponsible.
You become irresponsible. So you cannot call me irresponsible if I don't have the capacity, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Because
sometimes
I'm
willing.
Irresponsible because I have the capacity, but I don't respond. So I become irresponsible. But if I do not have the capacity, I cannot be irresponsible.
And now, let's talk about this, because you mentioned that different things that turn up in a men's fellowship. The struggling men, have they lost their capacity to respond?
It comes back to the part where we are dealing with things that have been broken for many years.
Yeah.
You're dealing with a generation that doesn't know what actually it is to be a man. Where, what are some of the things, the unique things God has given a man? Because you can't define this far from God's idea. Because we are struggling to explain what is God's idea of a man. How did God create a man? When he says, in my likeness, how does God look like? So
that's a good question.
Yes.
I see people looking for God, climb mountains, go to valleys, go abroad. Ask them if you met God. Nice. So what does God look like?
Yes, how does it look like? Image.
Maybe he's mad.
In his image and his likeness. That means if you are to define a man, if you define a man far from the image and the likeness of God, then we will struggle to deal with some of the issues we are dealing with. A man can be inside is a man, outside is a woman, inside is a woman.
It's trapped inside of a body of a woman.
It's confusing people, my God.
It's confusing.
It's very confusing.
You heard about this, the World Swimming Championship last week?
Yeah.
Where
I'm told even the UN is changing some of its terminologies in terms of gender.
So there's never been a time like now for people like you, Brian, to speak what you're saying.
Yeah.
So we are dealing with deeper issues than what we are talking about surface. Now, what you see people saying, you know what, I can be inside this and outside this, that's just as a result of not understanding the likeness and the image of God. And if we take time to share with people, for instance, let me give an example from here. God has given a man the ability to create wealth, to create a home, to have to reproduce. You know, a woman receives the seed from us. You give a woman a seed and she gives you a child. That means the power for
penetrate and impregnate.
Yes. The power of a woman to create an atmosphere for the child to grow up. To become the human being and to become a responsible. But the man must give the seed.
Something
now,
to work with.
Luke 8:11 says, parable is the seed is the word. That means that if a man can understand the word of God and give a woman the word, the atmosphere will be created in a home for peace, for joy, for sustainability, for everything. If you find a generation where women are the most in charge and the men are running out of the things of God, we are in trouble.
But that's what's happened in our generation.
Exactly. That's why when we tell men, come in the presence of God, we are defining something bigger than what we can even articulate.
The problem is men feel like, maybe I'm wrong, but most men feel like church is a sissy thing. You know, it's for women. It's not a macho.
Maybe the way church has been defined.
Yes.
Rather than, because this is what I'm thinking. Let me speak for myself. I'm bored with church. And recently I had a conversation with the engineer Bran Adubang. I told him, I'm bored with Christianity. I said, what? Are you bored with the Christians or you're bored with Christianity? I'm like, actually, you're right. I'm bored with the Christians. I have no problem with Christ.
Yes.
And the church. It's just that when I come to his people, I can't relate.
Yeah.
And then you find it strange. I don't know about, Brian, if this relates with you. That the men who are in church, even women, will tell you that their real friends are in the world. But they fail to find real friends
in church.
I'm saying this to bring us back to say,
yes,
if men are not in church, is it that men don't want to be where God is, or the way that God is represented in the church?
These are very serious conversations.
So much so that the man cannot understand the image of God when he walks into this space.